Choice Hotels get you more for your money so you can maximize any road trip. Like with the road trippers we see here in their natural habitat, the breakfast area at a Comfort Inn. Here's a dad teaching his son how to make waffles, fluffy golden waffles. There's a mom making sure her daughter eats some fruit to avoid the "I'm hungry" from the back seat. And a sibling standoff over the last muffin. This is the cycle of vacation maximizationing in all its glory. Check into more. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Your burger is served, and this is our finest Pepsi Zero Sugar. Its sweet profile perfectly balances the savory notes of your burger.
That is one perfect combination. Burgers deserve Pepsi.
Brace the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started today at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. Enjoy complimentary access to the American Express Global Lounge Collection. And with a welcome offer of 150,000 points after you spend $20,000 on purchases on the card within your first 3 months of membership, your business can soar to new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum. Built for business by American Express.
This episode is brought to you by Polestar. There's only one true way to experience the all-electric luxury SUV Polestar 3, and that's to take a test drive. It can go from 0 to 60 in as little as 4.8 seconds with the dynamic handling of a sports car. But to truly understand how it commands the road, you need to be behind the wheel. Up to 350 miles of range, the 3D surround sound system by Bowers & Wilkins. It's all something you have to experience to believe. So book your test drive for Polestar 3 today at polestar.com.
If you went on a road trip and you didn't stop for a Big Mac or drop a crispy fry between the car seats or use your McDonald's bag as a placemat, then that wasn't a road trip. It was just a really long drive. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating McDonald's.
Hey business owners, we know you know the importance of maximizing every dollar. With the Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business American Express card, you can make your expenses work just as hard as you. From afternoon coffee runs to stocking office supplies and even team dinners, you can earn miles on all your business expenses. Plus, you can earn 110,000 bonus miles for a limited time through July 16th. The Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business Card. If you travel, you know. Minimum spending requirements and terms apply. Offer ends 7/16/25.
Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts.
David Sinkinson, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Toronto. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about the psychology of being a startup founder. This is a fascinating topic to me. There's a lot of founders out there, a lot of solopreneurs and entrepreneurs out there. And I think that in and of itself is super interesting. But I think what also is super interesting to me in this space of, the audience of this podcast is how do you start up and then scale an organization while establishing and then maintaining a healthy company culture and making sure that you keep in mind not only the great startup idea for the product or service that you have, but also like establishing the team and then growing
Mhm.
that team in a healthy, productive way. And that's easier said than done. I mean, that's hard to do in any organization, but in a startup climate, that's really challenging, and it's frankly not something that a lot of startups are thinking much about. And so we're going to explore all of this together today, and I'm super excited to have this conversation. As we get started, I wanted to share David's bio with everybody. David Sinkinson is a proven SaaS entrepreneur. He was the co-founder and CEO of AppArmor, the bootstrapped public safety software startup he led with his brother, Chris. Our AppArmor, excuse me, was purchased by Rave Mobile Safety in February of 2022 for $40 million. Later in 2022, both Rave Mobile Safety and AppArmor were acquired by Motorola Solutions for $560 million. Now Dave has a co-authored Startup Different and launched the Startup Different podcast to help show entrepreneurs that there's another better way to build your business. I'm going to pause there, David. What a fantastic story. What a fantastic background. Anything else you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in?
Just so I'm really here to pay it forward. I really want to help entrepreneurs avoid some of the mistakes that I made, that my co-founder made, who's my brother, of course, like you mentioned, and help people just sort of do better than we did. Because while we had a really good outcome and that was great, I do think there are some lessons to be learned and some myths out there that we can bust that will definitely be pretty valuable to anybody who's starting their own business nowadays.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and again, starting off with, I think, just kind of the general premise around the psychology of being a startup founder.
Mhm.
Startups generally, that's a hard gig, right? I mean, I think it takes a special kind of person
A crazy person?
Perhaps I wasn't going to say it, but perhaps a crazy person, or it really does, though. It takes a certain kind of person who's willing to wade in to the space to really start up, especially I think like tech startups. You have like kind of the mom and pop store startup, or there's different types of startups, right? And there's kind of a low key startup, like I'm going to start a lawn business, or I'm going to start,
Sure.
There's those kind of startups, which I'm not sure that's like as insane.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
But then there's like tech startups, or there's like other like really, in my mind, like kind of nutty startups that it's just to bootstrap your way up and to get funding and to just like really build it. It's going to take everything you got to really get it going. So why don't we start there, and then we can start exploring like, how did you build it? How did you scale it? How did you get to the point where you're actually selling it for $560 million? And doing it all while thinking about your people and your team. Let's start with just like the mindset. You and your brother Chris, you're co-founding this and you're starting to build it.
Yeah, you often hear sort of like the creed, don't start a business with a family member, and yet that's like exactly what I did. I guess I'll start out with a few things. So first is you were mentioning how kind of crazy it is, and it really is. It's something like 70% of startups fail within years 2 to 5, and for e-commerce and tech startups, it's actually about 80%. So it's actually higher. Of course, you're referencing some like mom and pops as well. So if you think about like restaurants are like 90% failure rate, like crazy high. So it is very, very difficult. And it's actually, I think, a big premise of kind of the concept behind Startup Different is that because it's so difficult, and this combined with this like pop culture approach to startups, with like people kind of have a sense of what they think your business ought to be about. And it's kind of a bizarre thing for a founder, because you'll go out there, you'll start something because you're excited. You have an idea, you want to take something on, you want to build a solution. And what happens is you get into the market, and guess what? It's slow going. It's really hard. It's difficult to get traction. Even when you get traction, it's hard to kind of get to the next level and keep scaling and building at your business. So the problem becomes, you start to kind of go just a little bit crazy. And that little bit of crazy is, you start listening to people who will say to you, oh, well, you should go for funding for your business. But funding isn't always good. And actually, even in the context of venture-backed startups, about 75% of venture-backed startups fail. So it's not even like a silver bullet that you'd expect there. You're going to get opinions from family members, friends, everybody and their mother about how you should be running your business. And because you feel like you're not achieving enough, you feel like you're not getting there fast enough, because there's a lot of this get big fast mentality in startups, that you start to make bad decisions and you start to buy into what we call startup myths. And so, as I just sort of alluded to, one of those myths is around funding, but there's a bajillion myths. They kind of come up all the time. And and we'll talk about this later, but in our upcoming book, we actually reference over 33 different business sort of like myths from all stages of your business, from nothing to all the way to the end, and selling and joining a new company. And so it's one of those things where it is a uniquely psychological challenge. I would actually argue it's very, very difficult. It's actually a documented phenomenon as to how challenging this sort of thing is, and how it can affect your decision making. So really, what we wanted to do is try to pay it forward and help people through this and understand that it's okay. Like, you're still a legit business if you're out there. You're acting like a mission-driven organization. You are solving problems for your customers. You are helping people in your own way, and you're making revenue and hopefully some profit while you're at it. Like, you're legit. Like, don't get in your own head because of what people think you should be.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. And can I ask too, like in the startup space, a lot of times in those early years, you're not making profit, right?
Yeah.
And in the tech space, I mean, and famously, a lot of tech companies, they're not even really making revenue. a lot of revenue in the early days, especially if you have if you're venture backed, you're not even making revenue in the early days, in the early years. Can you speak to that a little bit? That's always kind of baffled me.
Me too, to be honest, because so we started our business back in 2011. So we basically our product was, and I'll tell you why this is relevant and how it fits into revenue here in a second. But basically, our product was this like mobile app that was branded to universities or colleges that was all about public safety. So we called it AppArmor because it was like a personal safety app for the end user. And our focus was on always just getting revenue immediately. But back in those days, there was a lot of this talk like, users equals money, because that was just the early days of the app world kind of like showing up. Like I think the App Store was only a handful of years old, like 2 years old by then. So, but the problem with that was that, of course, that's not actually true. Like, having users doesn't necessarily, like, converting them to paying you somehow or having some sort of revenue model through that doesn't always happen. So in those early days, there was tons of that. Here's, $2 million of venture capital funding, go out, market the heck out of this thing, get a bajillion users. But then, 4 years later, when that funding generally tends to dry up, those businesses would go belly up because there was no actual validation of the business model from a revenue perspective. So sometimes there's that. Sometimes there's also investing based on hype, and you see this. I think AI is right in this right now. Now, I think AI is super legit. There are some really impressive things, and I think I'm hoping it's a net good thing for humanity. But you can see the amount of venture capital funding, particularly in the United States, for AI startups. So startups that are focused on their own large language models. It's crazy. It's an unbelievable amount of money. And it feels kind of like another bubble. So, but that market will consolidate, and the same thing will happen. There'll be people out there who kind of had a half-baked product, but it doesn't really work and it doesn't really solve any problems. And they go belly up, or they're acquired by other strategics in the market, and the market ends up being like, again, the Microsoft, I guess, and Google and all the big guys basically having their own tools that they've acquired or built in-house. But at any rate, so the thing there is, I guess, sometimes I really am not of the opinion that funding, especially for software entrepreneurs, SaaS entrepreneurs, I really don't think you need it. And I think that challenging yourself as to what you would do with that money and how that would help is important, because, again, your product, it's air. There's no warehouse. There's no shipping. You don't need to put the software code on a truck and drive it to the person's house. Like, it's just available over the internet. And if you're a capital intensive business, maybe you need funding, but in the software case, I'm just not convinced that it's actually necessary.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so you've given some kind of high level thinking around the early days around revenue or profit in those early days. The bottom line is, in the early days, it's hard. It's a grind. There's a lot of myths that are out there, a lot of kind of pop culture myths. And you just got to be careful to not just buy into stuff, and to stay true to your mission, stay true to your values, to not just go chasing whatever low-hanging fruit might be out there that you might think is, oh, I just got to go grab that thing because it looks easy. And you know, whatever you feel like your core value as a company is, that product or service that you're providing, to really pursue it in a dogged manner. And that's hard because the world we're in is so saturated. It's so oversaturated with products and services and information, to like be able to break through the noise and to be able to catch people's attention, even when you have an amazing product. It's just so hard, right? Can you speak to how like you started to do that?
Yeah, so we were, I'll just, for the record, you know, we were a B2B sort of business. So we sold directly to other businesses, those businesses being colleges and universities. And I actually think that in a B2B market, you come with a different set of complications, but something that I think is also generally easier. So the complication is that it takes a long time to convince organizations to purchase things. Generally speaking, it's about a 6-month plus sales cycle, okay, for software, which is a really long time. When you consider that, like, versus like consumer products where people are just buying them kind of all the time, like, you know, if you have a good flow, you have a website, they're putting in their credit card details, you're running, you don't do that in B2B. In B2B, you convince somebody at the organization and they sell internally. But once you get to the point where you can get into a couple of organizations, they're willing to take a chance on you, you're working with them, you wow them, you really go the distance for them, you throw in all these extra freebies. My co-founder calls it these sweetheart deals. You do everything you can to impress them. They will talk to their friends about you. They will, I like early on, you know, we got 1 school, then we had 4 schools, then we had 25 schools. Like, it really started going very exponentially. For consumer markets, I think it's really, really challenging. So on the one hand, you're right. There's a lot of apps out there. There's a lot of ideas out there. And it's basically like you're trying to yell in a room of people yelling. Like, it is really, really hard to get any attention, you know, particularly on social media. So like, we have a podcast as well, you know, our Start a Different podcast. And so actually I'm a little bit now exposed to this consumer space, and man, it's way harder. It's really difficult because there's just a lot of really interesting people out there. There's a lot of interesting ideas out there. So my feeling, at least for our space, was the way we got to the next level, the way we sort of, and if you think of like Clayton Christensen's Crossing the Chasm and going from sort of your early majority, your early adopters to your early majority, crossing that chasm to getting real scale and getting a lot of customers. For us, that was going the extra mile, doing the things that our customers needed us to do, maybe even like custom projects for some customers, which is kind of like a deal with the devil, but doing something like that so that we could. Custom code's just the worst. I can feel wherever my brother is right now, he's just like shuddering somewhere because he's just a cold chill down his spine because you know, it's one of those things that you kind of have to do that you don't really want to, but it's really important to help grow your business. And you got to be willing to do that as a small company, because the big companies, they're not going to do something like that. So doing those sorts of things. And then I will say, just in our unique situation, so we're Canadian, and obviously you want to be in the United States as market of first resort. We actually had a lot of Canadian clients, but breaking through that border was surprisingly hard. And we actually found that we were basically restarting. It was almost like we were starting the business over again, because the credibility wasn't built in the United States market. So we had to do that. We had to put in that effort and do the sweetheart deals and do that process all over again. And it culminated with one day we landed the University of Florida in that iconic gator. And then we could take that gator and we could talk to basically any organization in our market in the country.
So there's no easy answer, I guess, is what I'm hearing.
Hard work. Oh, and you got to get lucky too. You know, you need a balance. You know, the one thing about University of Florida was that they had, it's such a funny space, this like public safety app, this mobile app. It's very specific. You never hear about this niche market. By the way, I'm a big fan of niche markets. If you can go in and really impress people in that niche, they'll love you and they'll be so loyal. Like, we had years where our churn rate was like Sometimes we had no customers leave in a year, which is like unheard of. Generally in SaaS, it's pretty strong. It's like somewhere around like 93 to 97%, but we had years where like 99%, nobody left, or almost nobody left. And then, but putting in that effort and then getting a good bounce is something you need. And for us, it was that they had an app already. It was made by some students, and those students just didn't want to do it anymore. Made it an opportunity for us. We walked in there. We knew we had to win them. And so we did whatever it took to win that deal.
Yeah, very cool. So you put in the hard work, you're doing custom projects, custom coding, sweetheart deals, you're getting into the market, you're building, you're growing, you're scaling. But that scaling doesn't really happen early on because you're just trying to stay afloat, right? And you're trying to just break through. But eventually, if you are one of the few that survive in that first 2 to 5 years, you start to grow. How did you start to make that transition? Once you start to have a little bit of stability, you start to get into a little bit of a growth stage. What did that look like for you? Because one thing I've seen with founding teams when they have this really great idea is usually, not always, but usually, they have a great idea. Maybe they have technical expertise, but oftentimes they have little to no thought around like the organizational design, the people aspect, like a lot of those other things that are maybe you can get away with in the early founding days. You can get away with when you just have a small team of 5 or fewer people, but you start to grow, you start to scale, things get more complex. All of a sudden, those things matter a lot. So what did that look like for you guys?
That's a great question. So I'll tell you something kind of interesting. And whenever I talk about founders, I always say, founders could work in a cave as long as they have Wi-Fi. Like they're so invested. It's their baby, their business baby. They're all in. And in our naivete, when we hired our first employees, we're like, well, surely they'll be as excited and as motivated as we are about this. And not to be facetious, but it's just no one is going to be as excited as the founder is. Like there's just no comparison for lots of different complicated reasons. And so we actually had, and we write about this too, but we actually had something called our culture failure. So we bought into a startup myth that really bit us in the butt, which was that, kind of all startup cultures are the same, that at various organizations, it's not something you have to like work at. It's something that just sort of like happens naturally. And we found that was totally wrong. And what happened was, if you remember back in 2009, which feels like a million years ago now, but back in 2009, there was a Netflix had their infamous PowerPoint deck that was about culture. It was literally just called culture. And it was the Netflix culture, and it was how they did things. And back then that was really revolutionary. It was like, come into work whenever you want, wear whatever you want to work, work from home, like stuff that was like, I think probably actually basically table stakes now, but back then it was like pretty avant-garde. And so we were like, hey, we want to be a unicorn like Netflix. So we're gonna do this. And so we did it, and we had a handful of staff, and we tried to like implement this culture, and it just didn't work. My co-founder and I, we didn't work that way. We didn't really understand all the principles. We didn't get the nuance too of the Netflix culture, which was that people basically have to work incredibly hard all the time. Or they're let go. We didn't know that. We didn't read the fine print, I guess. And basically what happened a few months after us trying to do that was that all the employees left. And so we actually had to restart our hiring, like all the people that we had. And it was a real reflective moment. I remember turning to Chris and saying, like, are we done? Like, is it over? And like, of course it wasn't. We still had revenue and stuff like that, and we still had customers, but we were the only ones working there all of a sudden. And that was a really deflating moment. And so we decided we had to get this sorted out. We had to up our game on culture. And we actually joined a really, really good co-working space, which was perfect for us at the time. It's actually not dissimilar to your background right now. Sort of looks like that. And a little bit more Starbucksy, but kind of the idea. And, they actually did a really good job of teaching us how to build culture. And this is so funny because you just think as a founder, well, I'm an expert in all this stuff. I know what motivates people. Like, and I have an MBA, and so does my co-founder, and didn't matter. Didn't know what we were doing. We go into this co-working space. They kept people motivated. They had little snacks, free beer on Fridays, or it might have been Thursdays, but there was free beer at some point, mingling with other people, giving people a sense of like, what are we doing here? Why are we doing this? Like our principles, our values. So we totally restructured and built a culture that we understood and we could get behind. And man, we were more successful. Everything started working. I mean, we were selling more. First off, we could hire and retain staff. Then we were selling more. We were providing better customer service. And slowly it led me, at least, into an interest of understanding how we can continue to maintain and build on this culture. And so for me, that was really a journey into like empathetic leadership and understanding. It makes me sound like I was such a jerk beforehand or something. I like to believe I was a nice person, but I don't know. But basically just trying to like, invest in people as people, and care about them and work with them and give them a reason to be excited and happy and motivated and feeling psychologically safe at work. And that was a really, really big transition for us when we stopped going from the business school learning of people as so like, pieces to move on the board, as opposed to, no, these are people that we care about and we want to motivate. And the better they do and the more we invest in them, the better our output will be in the market.
Yeah. You said something earlier, when we started to explore this part of our conversation. I think it's important to double click on. You mentioned something around the something to the effect of, you just figure the culture would take care of itself. The culture will just happen. It'll emerge. And actually, that's true. The culture will just emerge. The problem is that it doesn't just automatically emerge in a positive way.
Correct. Yeah. It can be pretty messed up, right?
A culture will naturally emerge. It will just happen. But when you don't proactively like try to shape it in a positive, healthy way, it almost always will emerge in a rather unhealthy, toxic way. And that's not because you're nefariously like trying to exploit your people or anything. It's just it's human nature. Like it's the way organizations are. It's the way humans are. Like if you're not super proactive, when people get together in groups and in organizations, it tends to go that way. So you really have to be super proactive. You have to be super strategic in order to make sure that it goes in a healthy, positive, productive direction. And so everything that you learned from what didn't go so well, the second iteration, you started to shape it, to mold it. And that's exactly what I think we always need to try to do. And that's what I think a lot of founders find themselves in the same boat. Like they really don't learn that lesson early on. And in some cases, they never really learn that lesson. Like if their growth is so good, like if their just trajectory of growth is so high that they can just get away with it because they're just constantly growing, constantly hiring, like eventually it'll catch up with them. But sometimes that takes years because they're just constantly growing and they constantly just keep on hiring more and more people. But like here in Utah, we have something called Silicon Slopes. It's kind of a play on Silicon Valley.
Oh, cool.
We have our own tech hub just south of Salt Lake City. It's a pretty strong tech hub. We have a lot of headquarters for big tech companies. We have, we're one of the biggest hubs for entrepreneurial activity in the country.
For sure.
And we've had this phenomenon happen where we have a lot of tech startups. We have a lot that have grown very rapidly. We have some unicorns, and we've also had, with all of the tech layoffs in the news, we've had our fair share in Utah as well, and we've had this phenomenon where you've had these tech companies that have grown so crazy rapidly, and then you think everything's wonderful, everything's amazing, until it's not. And then all of a sudden they're laying off half of their employees, and then all the stories start to emerge. And then you start to hear behind the scenes and you start to realize, oh my gosh, that was like a total shit show happening in that company.
Then all of a sudden the Glassdoor reviews, right, start showing up, and this was like, this guy's all or what. I think the term I would use is deliberate. I think culture has to be really built deliberately. And you're so right, though. Like it's so common for founders to miss it. And I think part of this is it's one of those things that founders kind of believe is like a secondary thing to worry about. That this, I've got all these other things that I got to work on, and then my last or second last item on the list. I'll get to the culture thing that I got to work on today, but I got to go through all these other problems. But you're right, though. It spins out of control. And the other thing that I'll mention here, too, is that, those massive layoffs, that's also dovetails into a related myth, which is this whole like get big fast strategy where a venture capital firm really doesn't there's probably one slide in the pitch deck that's like, we have a good culture. And there's a photo of everybody smiling and high-fiving or something, but they don't really validate for that. They're validating on a business model based off of almost like an accountant's view of the business, which is important, but is not close to the whole picture. So when they hire hundreds of people, and then those people are brought into a very toxic, empire building, territorial sort of culture, the end result is like you have to get rid of a ton of people, and you have huge fiefdoms and problems in your culture that are really, really tough to manage. I actually think the HR issues, and I know we've been talking about a whole bunch of different startup complexities. I think the HR issues, the managing the people, keeping them motivated, keeping them happy and productive, those are the toughest challenges for businesses.
Well, this has just been a really fascinating conversation, David. I think we could go on and on, but I also know the time. I probably need to let you go and get on with your busy day. So as we start to wrap up, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, find out more about your book, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book, Startup Different, the myth-busting blueprint for your multi-million-dollar business, comes out in October. So check it out. Depending on when this airs, it might be out right now. So you can check that out. Of course, on Amazon or any major online book retailer. As well, we have our podcast, Startup Different, available wherever you get your podcasts. You can check us out on YouTube too. And of course, we talk about startup myths and all these kinds of issues as well. And my last word on the topic today that I'd like to leave for any founders that are listening today is, and we kind of alluded to this early on, but around the psychology, I want to come back to that because I think it's super important and it affects all of your decision making. Is don't pursue validation among your peers. Pursue validation in the market. That's where you're going to find success. That's where you're going to find the path, sort of the startup promised land. As opposed to veering off course, listening to some crazy advice from a far off aunt that doesn't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Well said. Well, David, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what David can do for you. Check out the book. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.